Hello, I'm Richard Exley, the storyteller. I was only 20 years old when I was called to serve my first church. It was a small congregation numbering less than 20 people, most of whom were older than I am now. It was located in extreme southeastern Colorado, just 5 miles from the Kansas border. We spent almost 3 years there, and although it has been more than 50 years now, I still remember our time there with great fondness. It's the people I remember best. Brother and Sister Hoover, who were in their 80s and never missed a service. Frank Surprise, a big burly guy who served on the church board. And Brother and Sister Trout, who eked out a living on a small farm north of town. Then there's Mary Volke, a widow who lived alone in a small house across the alley behind the church. And then there's Ben and Emma Davis and their 3 teenage daughters. Our salary was small, less than $50 a week, but the church did furnish a parsonage for us to live in. It was a drafty old house, nearly impossible to heat in winter. To make ends meet, I worked at a series of odd jobs. I drove the hearse for funerals. I served as a substitute teacher from time to time. But my most lucrative job was flagging for the local crop duster. I remember one Christmas when well, we were flat broke. Things were so tight, we couldn't afford Christmas presents, not even for each other, let alone for our parents. Instead of bemoaning our unhappy plight, we decided to make homemade gifts. Brenda made her folks a dried wildflower arrangement from a piece of driftwood. From a second piece of driftwood and some parts I salvaged from a discarded lamp, I made Dad and Mom a TV lamp. Just a couple of days before Christmas, I answered the door and found myself face to face with the county commissioner. He handed me an envelope and I asked, "What's this?" "That's a check from the co-op I sold your wheat." Looking at him in dumbfounded amazement, I said, I didn't know I had any wheat. He just smiled and said, "Well, I found some with your name on it, so I sold it for you." With that, he wished us a Merry Christmas and left. Sitting beside Brenda on the couch, I opened the envelope and gasped when I saw a check for $220. That was more than a month's income for us. Now I could buy Brenda the radio clock she had been wanting. Oh, for days we felt wealthy. Maybe our best gift was a Methodist preacher named Jim. Following a painful divorce, the district superintendent had assigned him to this small 3-point charge: Bristol, Grenada, and Holly. He was alone and hurting. Since the Methodist Church didn't have a Sunday evening service, he spent most Sunday evenings worshiping with us. Following the service, we would adjourn to the parsonage for sandwiches. Over coffee and conversation, we built a friendship which continues to this day. Jim's fingerprints are all over my ministry. One year, my 14-year-old brother came to spend the summer with us. He and another 14-year-old boy became fast friends. They salvaged some 50-gallon drums and some discarded lumber, so I helped them make a raft. Once it was completed, we launched it in a small pond west of town. They spent many a long summer day swimming and fishing off that raft. All of that changed one Sunday afternoon in late August when 3 hippies showed up in a Volkswagen van. 2 long-haired guys and a girl in a granny dress. For no apparent reason, they began throwing rocks and broken pieces of concrete at Bob and Terry, who were suntanning on their raft. A chunk of concrete hit my brother on the hand, breaking his finger. To escape the barrage of rocks and concrete, they swam to the far side of the pond and hitchhiked back to town. When Bobby showed me his hand and told me what had happened, I was furious. I grabbed my 12-gauge shotgun and a box of shells and headed for the car. When we skidded to a stop, the hippies were just launching a small rowboat. Leaping out of the car, I jacked a shell into the chamber and pointed the shotgun at them. Bob was standing just behind me, shouting, "Shoot 'em, Richard! Shoot 'em!" I took a couple of steps toward them and ordered them to get back in their van and leave. One of the guys said, "What about our boat?" I said, "It's your boat of your life. Doesn't matter much to me either way." All the while, Bob is telling me to shoot him. I must have scared them, because they left the boat, got in the van, and drove off. Once my adrenaline rush wore off, I realized that I'd committed a felony, assault with a deadly weapon. I could see the headlines in the local paper. Assembly of God pastor arrested for assault with a deadly weapon. Sick with shame, I drove myself to the police station to turn myself in. When I told the police chief what I had done, he acknowledged that I had indeed committed a felony. When I asked him if he was going to arrest me, he just chuckled and said, "Not today, but if those hippies press charges, I will have to arrest you." I must have looked sickly pale, for he continued, "I don't think you have much to worry about. Those hippies probably had a van full of illegal drugs. The last thing they want to do is interact with the police." I drove home, put my car in the garage. I was thankful he hadn't arrested me, but for the next few days I got a sick feeling in my stomach every time I saw a police cruiser drive by. Thankfully, nothing ever came of it. But now you know the dumbest thing I've ever done. In my defense, I was only 22 years old and as dumb as a stick. But that's no excuse. This is Richard Exley, the storyteller, straight from the heart.